We are sitting with Rick Loock, and here we are here in Chatham Borough at 20 Yale Street, and this is for the Veterans Project of the Chathams, a video interview. So,
okay.
Rick, let's just get started with what I'd like to always have as an open-ended question. Talk to me a little bit about how you got involved in joining the Air Force.
In high school, in my senior year, I went to Chatham High School. In my senior year, we had a career day, and one of the careers I chose was Air Force. And I just liked that. Back then, in 1965, Vietnam was starting to really kick in. So I kind of knew that it wouldn't be too much longer I'd have before I got drafted. So I went up to Dover, where the recruiter was, took the qualifying exams, and they said, "You're hired." They told me, they said, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I'd like to try military police." And the recruiter said, "Wonderful, nobody wants to be a cop." You know, so that was a long story. But I went to basic training at Lackland Air Force Base in Texas, and that was in April of 1966. I was April 26th. Back then, I believe, if I remember correctly, basic training was 6 weeks. So we got that, and at the end of the 6 weeks, we were all brought into a big day room, or the whole barracks, and they told us where we were going and what we were going to do. And they called my name, and they said, "You're going to be going to Mountain Home Air Force Base in Idaho." And being locally from Chatham, I said, "Where's Idaho?" "And you're going to be on the fire department." And I'm saying to myself, because you didn't question that, fire department? Okay. So I came home for a little while on leave, reported into Mountain Home Air Force Base, and we met the first sergeant the next morning, and he said, "Come on, I'll show you around." There were 3 of us, so we went around different places, and he said, "And here's your shop where you're going to be working." And I said to myself, that doesn't look like a fire department. There's no big doors or anything. It was a carpenter shop. I was going to be a structural person. So again, "Yes, sir," no problem. And I spent, I think, till October of '67 at Mountain Home Air Force Base, and then I was volunteered and went into a 555th Red Horse Squadron in the Air Force. It was all heavy construction. That's what Red Horse did. And the entire squadron went to Eglin Air Force Base for 3 months to learn the conditions that we would be doing construction and all that, And then I was stationed at Cam Ranh Bay in South Vietnam. We had in-house training, and we completed that. And then prior to going to Vietnam, our whole entire squadron went to Eglin Air Force Base in Florida for 2.5 to 3 months of other construction. If you were going to be paving runways, if you were going to be building stuff, that's what you learned, to operate under the conditions that we were the only squadron that I know of that augmented the military police on the base at Cam Ranh Bay. We were issued flak vest helmets, M16s, and if there was a problem, we could back them up, and help out. And we pulled guard duty once in a while, but our squadron was self-sustaining. We had our own everybody. We had our administrative staff. We had our own mess hall. I want to guess probably 250 to 300 people. And we were totally self-sustaining. If they sent us somewhere, then you'd have a cook, a doctor, not a doctor, but a medic and stuff. I mean, we did not have to rely on the base for anything. We had our own construction projects, and I was told we did about $20 million worth of construction in the 1 year we were there.
What would you describe as the most extensive construction project during your time?
Probably putting up revetments on different Air Force bases in Vietnam and Thailand, that if you had your airplane parked there, so we built revetments out of steel and concrete on either side of it, so if it did take a mortar around, it would blow up, but it would be contained. And then at some point we even put roofs on, and we had to do that at night because we poured concrete. If you tried it during the day, it was so hot that it would suck all the water out of the concrete. So we did that at night, which the bad part about that is you lit us up, you know, and we did take mortar fire once in a while, you know, but it didn't last long, but, you know, that was interesting.
What did the, when you did sort of a cap or over
Right.
these revetments or whatever,
Right.
what did they sort of look, was it curved?
Yes, it had your two walls and then there was a round dome. So if it hit, it would go off to the side. It wouldn't lay on top.
Yeah.
And it was very. I did a lot of steel work. You know, even though technically I was a carpenter for wood, you know, that's how diverse we were.
No, yeah.
So
Now, when you, I gather you traveled around to other
Yes.
bases. What was that logistically like, and what were the aircraft used?
all right, the aircraft. I spent about 3 months on a small island off the coast of Cambodia, Phu Quat Island. It was the purpose of the military there was a B-52 radar tracking station, and they had a makeshift tent for food, showers, 55-gallon drums. So they sent a group of us, about a dozen of us there, and then we flew in on C-7A Caribous and landed there, and we offloaded all the material. We get material every week, and we built like 4 structures there. But we had 1 carpenter, 1 plumber, 1 electrician, 1, you know, and when it was, let's say, the plumber's time to be, he didn't do it. He made sure that everybody learned how to do that. So it was a very, very interesting time. Learned an awful lot. Some of it is, you know, but it was very interesting. I truly, looking back at it, it was enjoyable. And then from there, after my 1 year was up, I was stationed at Naha Air Force Base in Okinawa. And prior to that, they said, oh no, once you spend your first year in Vietnam, you can go back to the States. And they had like the East Coast, Middle, West Coast, you know. So I certainly put down McGuire Air Force Base in New Jersey and Dover, Delaware and stuff. And they sent me to Okinawa. So, but again, that's the military. And I remember telling my parents that, and my mother was so upset. You should be able to come home. I said, Mom, listen, I'm in the Air Force. I don't tell them what to do. It was and I would do planning there. So it was I really thought about enlisting, but then I had a Chief Master Sergeant in our squadron said, you do know if you re-up, you will go back to Vietnam. You are a non-contiguous deployment, so you'll be back there for at least another year. And I said, you know, I did my time there. I'm going home. When I got to Mountain Home Air Force Base in Idaho, I had 1 stripe. You got that out of basic training. I was an airman 3rd class. Within, I think it was a year, you took courses and you had to get qualified, you know, to the next level of competency, and that was a level 5. And once I had that, I was promoted to Airman 2nd class, which was 2 stripes. And when I went to Vietnam, I was an Airman 2nd class with 2 stripes. While I was there, I got promoted to, back then it was called a sergeant. That was 3 stripes. So when I got to Mountain Home Air Force Base, I got there in January of 67, and I got promoted to Staff Sergeant there and that's what when I left the military, that's what I left for. So to make, brag a little bit, but to make staff sergeant under 4 years, I had 3-4 people that had 12 years, same career field, same qualification. The initial thing was 4 years, and you re-enlisted on a 4-year basis. Now I think it's all changed a little bit. So
your total time there
it was just 4 months. No, 4 years.
4 years.
4 years. The worst time I had, fear-wise, was when we were on Phu Quat Island. There was a large contingency of North Vietnamese there, and we regularly drew mortar fire. They couldn't, do a land thing. So, and that was terrifying. And I remember one night they were bombing us with mortars. So our boss called his boss, and they had a destroyer sitting off the coast, lobbing shells in to the bad guys. And then they brought in the C-7A, C-130 with the miniguns. It was breathtaking, but it was a scary time. I mean, we went down to the beach regularly to get sand. We were always armed, Our whole enclosure was barbed wire with claymore mines, So that was a little, especially from a young kid from Chatham, New Jersey. And it was quite an experience. I liked it. When I was interviewed prior to leaving, I had to go make our squadron commander, who was a full bird colonel, and he said, "Well, what don't you like?" And I said, "Nothing." "Well, why don't you want to read that?" I said, "No." I said, "I signed up for 4 years, and that's it. I'm going home." And he said, "Well, thank you for your time." And I said, "I'm sure you have a lot more important things to do than talk to me," but it was an experience. I truly enjoyed it. The comrade, I still regularly, once a year, call a couple guys that I was with just to keep in touch, see what they're. Back in 95, I think it was, we had an Air Force reunion at Herbert Field in Florida. So we went down, my wife and I went down for that. And it's funny, my wife said to me, "How are you going to know what he looks like?" I said, "I'll know." Rich's wife said the same thing to him. "How are you going to?" He said, "We'll know." Yeah, and it just happened.
And you knew.
And, oh yeah, right away.
So in this transition time when you were thinking, I've really done well, I've kind of enjoyed this work, I have survived,
yeah.
I've spent my 4 years, it's time to transition. What were you thinking coming out of the service were going to be your next move, and how did you, and this is where we get into a key discussion, what were you thinking you were going to be able to bring to a future employing situation, the value that you had experiencing all that you did in the Air Force? Talk to me about making that transition, what your goals were, and how that worked out.
I hadn't really thought too much about what I was going to do. When I got out of high school for 9 months, I worked at Atlantic Builders down on Summit Avenue. And I knew when I came home on leave in August of 69 that I had a job there when I got out. While I was home on leave, some of the police officers in town who I knew and my brother knew, one of them said to me, "Why don't you come on the police department?" And I said, "Say that again?" He said, "Yeah, why don't you fill out an application?" "Sure, bring it up." So, one-page application. Now this is in May of 70, I got a phone call at home. I was living with my parents on Coleman Avenue. And the gentleman on the phone said, "Is Richard there?" I said, "Speaking." He said, "This is Chief Rudo from the police department." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Are you still interested in the job?" I said, "Certainly." I mean, I hadn't really thought about it. He said, "Well, can you come up and see me?" And I said, "Sure." That night I went up. The interview lasted 2-3 minutes. That was not one question about police work. But back then, we had 21 officers. I think all 18 or 19 of them all had military. That's just the way it was, you know. And now I don't know. There's very few military on the police department, but that's how I joined the police department. And I think the value that I picked up, I got some good supervisory skills as a staff sergeant, you know, because you start, now you're doing less of the physical work, but you're doing more of the mentoring, which was very helpful. And that carried right over onto the police department. And the years I went through there, you know, having that particularly having a background where, I won't say you didn't question anything, but life was a lot simpler there. If the sergeant said you go out and stand in the rain, you went out and stood in the rain. You didn't say why, you know. So, and again, that was the same thing that we picked up from my experience in the military. And working with other veterans, it was, you fit right in.
Do you stay in touch or up to date on Air Force happenings, or, you know, just tell me a little bit about it.
Not really. I look at the website. We have the 555th Red Horse Squadron from Vietnam has an association. I belong to that. They have a website, and they have also might have pictures on the website. So, you know, I do kind of keep in touch. But like I said, Rich Murray was probably my closest friend, and we still, matter of fact, he called me he called here, and then when he found out I was with FEMA in St. Croix, he called me there one night. And my God, we were on the phone for an hour, and what we talked about, I had no idea, but, you know.
So the police department, did that become a career?
Yes.
Tell me about.
I retired in 1994 as a lieutenant. There was a chief, 2 lieutenants, 5 or 6 sergeants, and then the rest patrolmen dispatch. I was the operational lieutenant, and then I had an opportunity to retire from there and go to work as the director of emergency management for Morris County. And that was an opportunity I just couldn't turn down. I went up and interviewed, and we had, I got more money than I was making on the police department. And so I took that job. At that point, we had 2 children in college. So I worked for the next, I think, 6 years before I ever cashed a pension check from the police department, because it went right in to pay for college. And my wife has always worked. So between that and the salary I got in emergency management, we were able to keep the house and do that.
And talk to me a little bit about the EMO responsibilities and how there might have been some connection with all that you experienced in service with things that you were called upon to do with the Morris County EMO.
We operated on a military philosophy, not philosophy, but we had our rank structure, and we did a lot of different projects, and we had a lot of volunteers that we coordinated with. And again, going back to my military and my supervisory position with the police department, made it a lot more effective. You know, I learned to listen to people instead of just, you know, giving orders, you know. And again, I truly like that. But when it came time to retire, I said, I'm done. You know, not that I didn't like it. I could see new changes coming in, more technology related, and I was an old person, and couldn't do a lot of that. And I said, you know what? I'm going out on my terms. So I retired from there. And then my wife was still working. She said, well, don't think you're going to sit home and do nothing while I'm working. So I called a friend of mine who I had known for many, many years, who happened to be the federal coordinating officer with FEMA. I said, Bill, I'm interested. He said, check your mail tomorrow. So an application, and I went to work for him, and I spent almost 10 years with FEMA.
Where were you located during that time?
I was a reservist, so you would get deployed, I spent 7 months in California, 6 months in Mississippi, Pennsylvania, New York State, Morris County. And that was the nice thing about getting a disaster in Morris County. I knew all the players from my association with, so you can see how one just almost piggybacks onto another.
Now, you mentioned reservists. Now, did you stay in the Air Force Reserves?
No,
when you got,
no.
So
no.
when you say reservists,
There are two categories of workers for FEMA, what they call the core people, who are full-time employees. They have vacation, they have hospital, it's their full-time job. And I was a reservist where I was only activated when there was a disaster. I would be notified to report to California, New York, wherever. And I did that for almost 10 years. I had, I think, a total of about 54 years with government at various levels. And I met some truly wonderful people. And the one thing about FEMA is the employees I work their hardest to help the applicant, which was the town or something like that, get what they were entitled to reimbursement-wise. Our job was to make sure that if we were tracking labor, everything was categorized, and I just worked with some just unbelievably knowledgeable people. And help, all you had to do is put your hand up and 3 people would come help you, whatever and I truly miss that. A lot of the FEMA people were military, had been in the military, had retired, and once they found out you were in the military, they didn't cut you, but you had that camaraderie,
and this all during this time, you are living here in
Yep.
Chatham Borough.
Yeah.
Did you ever have occasion to talk to me? We can get into a little bit about your family. Did you ever have occasion to talk to family or friends about military service? And if so, how did you talk to them about your take on
Yeah.
all that you went through, and was there any
Yeah.
encouragement to consider?
Yes, I think my oldest son Jeffrey had gone to Nichols College, and it just wasn't for him. So he spent about a year and a half at Nichols, and then he came home and said, "It's just not for me." So my wife said, "Jeff, the only thing I ask is at some point you go back and get your degree." So he then worked privately for a company out of Newark Airport because he was a loadmaster in the Air Force. So I said, that's a good branch to go in, and he traveled all over the world. And
So actually, we'll back up a little bit. This is your son.
right,
Tell me about his a little bit about his journey. He was in the Air Force, yes?
Yes.
Okay, so did he talk to you, Dad, about that opportunity? Tell me how that happened, briefly.
the only time we really did that is he was a loadmaster on a C-141. Back then, in the early 90s, that was the biggest transport the Air Force has. And he was sent all over the world. And he would tell, and I got on the phone with him one night before my wife did, and I said, "Jeff, do me one favor. Don't tell your mother where you're going. Only tell her where you've been." And he goes, "That's good, I like that." And it just made, because I knew her and I would worry. We always thought he never left McCord. So I just tell us, when you get back, tell us what you did. And he spent 4 years. And again, he said, that's it. He had gone up to visit his sister, who was living in Connecticut at the time, in Greenwich. And one of my daughter's husband's friends was on the police department. And Jeff said, the guy said, "Well, why don't you take the exam?" He said, "Well, I don't live in Connecticut. And Greenwich doesn't care where you live, as long as you come to work." Took about 6 months to vet him, because Greenwich is a big police department. It's like 160-something people. So eventually that worked out where he was on the police department in Greenwich. My daughter was living in Greenwich. She was a marketing director. And my youngest son, Michael, was still in college. So when Mike got out of college, he said he took the alternate route for being appointed on Hanover Township Police Department. And he became a patrolman on Hanover Township, which is a couple towns away. And Jeffrey is now a sergeant in Greenwich Police Department. He's been on like almost 21 years. And Michael, our youngest, had just September 1st been appointed as the police chief in Hanover Township. Yeah, so it's really funny because I haven't told this to too many people, but way back when, I said to my wife and a couple of our good friends, I said, when they, meaning Jeff and Mike, get ready to retire, Jeffrey will be a sergeant and Michael will be a chief of police. I'm so proud of both of them. My daughter's done wonderful. And I'm proud of this. They wanted to do it on their own. And the only thing I said to both of them is, do not go back to my police department. Not that we had anything wrong, but they would always be judging you on what they knew from me. So they never, there were no openings anyway, but but they're both done remarkably well. And we now have 11 grandchildren.
That's fabulous. So you have to think that how you lived your life and conducted your life, and maybe the lessons and with the children growing up, they absorb attitudes and stories maybe, and
one of the saddest parts, and I know there's nothing that can be done about it, is I don't believe now in Chatham Borough Police Department there are any police officers who live in town. They all live out of town. When I was on, we had 21 officers. I think 20 of them lived in town. So you have a tie to the town. I mean, half of them always were coaching something or participating in something. Like I was in the Rotary Club and JCs. I coached for years. I helped coach the kids, various teams. But now there's hardly any law enforcement interaction. I won't say there isn't any, but not to my knowledge like it used to be.
Tell me about what you feel is the special value of having a police force that they're also residents of that town.
You have more on the line if you live in town. You're part of the community, and I just think community policing is the answer. I think the greatest times I had on the police department was when I was on foot patrol at Main and Passaic up here, because you got to meet hundreds of people every day, while you were there. And one of the things I told both boys, I said, when you're on patrol and you're out there in the summertime, you're going to see little kids selling lemonade. Always, always, always stop and buy some lemonade. You might not ever want to drink it, but buy it, And but we don't. There's not that attachment anymore. I'm not saying anything bad about the police department. They do a great job, but you don't have the hands-on. Your heart side of it, because at the end of their shift, they go home. Not only do they go home,
they're out of town.
They go away. Yeah. It built the foundation for the other jobs that I've had based on the military experience. You took care of your best friend. You just took care of each other. I can remember going into some bar fights where if you hit one, you hit a ball. But it definitely has an impact. I would like to see our government mandate, like a draft, not necessarily the military, because not everybody's cut out to be in the military, but there's got to be some community service associated with what you're drawing from the country. I don't care if it's digging ditches. Look at what Roosevelt did with the construction companies and stuff. I think they need to do that, because you then start to realize how fortunate you are here as to other parts of the world, but you learn that discipline of working together as a team. And I just think, and I'm sure there's lots of people that say, well, women should be there. Not everybody's going to be able to do it, but make it some kind of requirement. You can go help somebody do something. So, and that's my job at the county, and my job at FEMA was to help people. And that's the name of the game. It's not me, it's to help them. Military has given me the foundation that I've taken through my other careers, if you will. And I've noticed more and more now, like with FEMA, there's an awful lot of retired military people. There's not very many young people. You know, you don't have 18, 19, 20-year-olds, but you do have some civilians. But again, that, oh, you're a veteran? It just opens the doors. And now they judge you by that. So, big. That's why I said if everybody could have that, and it doesn't have to be for 4 years. 2 years is enough. Keep it local, but give back to the community, and that's what I don't find our younger people are doing. You know, I'm so blessed with my daughter and 2 sons. They're all involved in their children's sports, you know, and family and stuff like that. You know, that makes a difference.